Transportation Authority. It should be Wednesday, October 16th. And like I said, it's 1:01 p.m. Do we have a quorum? All right, then, we're ready to go. Let's start by standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. All right, do we have any board members participating remotely?
We do not.
Okay, and let the record show Supervisor or Director Gregory is here. Could you do the roll call, please? Boy, this is loud.
Mark Joseph,
Yes.
Donald Williams,
Yes, present.
Kevin Eisenberg,
Present.
Liz Alessio,
Present.
Scott Sedgley, Alfredo Pedroza, Ryan Gregory,
Here.
Paul Doring, Robin McKee Cant,
Here.
Devereaux Smith. And we have confirmed absences today from Director Garcia, Director Shuto, and Director Mueller. We do have a quorum.
Thank you. Right, adoption of the agenda. Do we have any changes to the agenda? None from me. I've learned my lesson, as I pointed out. So we'll need a motion and a second to adopt the agenda as is. Moved by Alessio, seconded by Doring. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Then we're ready for public comment. Any members of the public who wish to make a comment either online or in person? Okay, then we're off to the races. Let's move now to chairperson, board members, MTC, ABAG updates. I don't have anything important to report, so I'll pass it on to any board members.
Do you want me to do the commissioner report for supervisor, director?
Well,
Oh.
or we could defer.
No,
to
he's here. Never mind.
Our MTC representative. Good timing.
It was backed up.
As long as you showed up in time to make a report, it works for us.
I was only joking about the traffic. Maybe Kate can fill in, but in terms of MTC, we continue to work on the select committee that's looking at a regional, solution for the transit fiscal cliff. I think we're winding down to our last meetings. And again, some of the things that the regional body is thinking about is doing a regional sales tax that can fund, the transit operations throughout the region. We are working together with different stakeholders, Barry Council, the business groups being mindful of that. The issue of equity has also been brought up around, the impacts of working families. So that's something that's sensitive to that. The other part on bridge tolls, there is some discussion at the authority to look at increasing bridge tolls, in a phased manner, starting with 50 cents, I believe, in 2026 and beyond. The justification for that is we do need to make sure our bridges are structurally sound and healthy. I can tell you, having gone to New York and talked to the folks that have millions and millions of dollars in debt on our bridges, they want to make sure our bridges are healthy, and we all do too. We haven't had, these increases to support the bridges, so it's something that, while it is unpopular, the direction I gave to staff is I can support looking at increasing bridge tolls if we look at the totality of what we're doing to making sure that working families have different options in paying higher tolls. That could mean a means-based program on BART. It can mean discounts on express lanes. So we can't look at it as a silo. We have to look at the totality of it. I do anticipate that going forward, but again, it's going to be done in a phased approach and being mindful of what it means to our working families. I know I'm missing something, but I'm happy to answer any questions if anyone has any. And our bridges, by the way, like if you travel out of state, in New York, they're like $20. So our bridge tolls are lower than what you see in other parts of the country. Doesn't mean that's why you do it. There has to be clear justification. And I can tell you, the whole commission was very clear with staff of, this is not increasing bridges to build the reserve fund. This is increasing tolls to make sure we have healthy bridges. So happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Then Director Garcia is not here on ABAG. I don't know if we have any other comments on ABAG, so we'll move straight then to Executive Director's update.
Director Joseph, just real quick, just on the ABAC fund, if I can,
Okay.
Because we did pull the regional measure that was going to be looking at, some housing bonds. We did direct staff, as chair of one of those organizations, that MTC has. We did ask staff to look at what are some of the policy discussions we can have at the regional level that can make housing more affordable to build. It can't just be always new money, new taxes. It's what are we doing that's getting in the way of seeing housing be built? So
Okay.
just anticipate ABAG, MTC, and BAIFA as those organizations that are going to look at policy issues. That might make some of us uncomfortable around local control. But
Mhm.
if we want more housing for families, we got to get a little uncomfortable. So
Fair enough. Thank you. Executive Director.
Good afternoon, everybody. I wanted to introduce a new staff member, Renelle Coombs, has recently joined NVTA. Where are you, Renelle? Recently joined NVTA in procurement and contracts. She is retired from the U.S. Coast Guard. Renelle worked as a procurement officer for 17 years for the Coast Guard. Since 2015, she has held similar roles at various agencies, including Yuba County Water Agency, Sacramento Municipal Utility District, and the Air Force. Renelle has extensive experience in the field of procurement and contracts. She has a strong knowledge of government and compliance and regulations. And Renelle is a welcomed asset to the NVTA team, so we're happy to have you here. Danielle Schmitz has been appointed to the California Transit Association's Federal Legislative Committee. Congratulations, Danielle. Meetings and events. In the latter part of September, I traveled to Washington as part of the California Transit Association's federal lobby trip. The group consisted largely of transit general managers from around the state and legislative staff. Discussions with federal legislators focused on the ongoing challenges with federal 13C labor provisions and the conflict with the California Public Employee Pension Reform Act. Also increasing revenues for zero-emission buses and funding for transit-oriented developments. On October 3rd, NVTA held a retreat for the Technical Advisory Committee. The group heard from 3 speakers focused on development, housing, and transportation to better understand how we can create a vision that ties these disciplines together over the next 25-year time horizon of the countywide transportation plan. NVTA sponsored the Walk and Roll to School on October 9th, which was hosted by the Napa Valley Bike Coalition with an estimated 2,000 young participants, and the numbers are still being finalized, but I think that was the optimized number. And NVTA will have a booth at the St. Helena Harvest Festival this Saturday, and staff invites you. It's a game that we have, and Emily will have to explain it to you the day of. We are continuing to recruit for our advisory committees. Members of the public interested in participating at NVTA on one of those committees should go to our website or contact Emily Charrier on that. Other business, most of you probably have seen in the newspaper, but Measure U endorsements have been unanimous by the Press Democrat, the Napa Valley Register, and the St. Helena Star. And then staff, I just wanted to acknowledge Patrick Band, so huge shout out to Patrick, oh, there he is, for doing such a great job coordinating the Technical Advisory Committee retreat. And we just really appreciated your effort and how well that came together. And that concludes my report. Thank you.
Any questions for the director? All right, then we'll move to number 9, Caltrans update. Do we know if we have a Caltrans representative online?
Hi, Imani, can you hear us? I'll go ahead and share your updates on the screen.
Hi, good afternoon, board members. I believe Anthony Kabangangang is our project manager who's going to present this month's Caltrans report. Thank you. Can you unmute Anthony?
One moment, please.
Thank you.
Kathy, can you?
Thank you. Hi, good afternoon, board members. My name is Anthony Cavangangan. I'm with Caltrans Project Management, Napa County. I'm reporting Caltrans projects. There are 34 active projects in multiple phase. Under project initiation report, there are 3 projects. Under environmental, there are 7 projects. Project 0Q800, Napa 121, major damage, permanent restoration. The PNED is end of the month. And for the projects under the design, there are 9 projects. Project 4J820. Oh, sorry, let's go back. Environmental, there is another project OJ890. This is in partnership with City of Napa and NVTA. The PNED has been shifted to 7/2025. Projects under design, there are 9 projects. Project 4J820 is the Tulakay Creek Bridge replacement. RTL has been shifted to 7/2025. Another project under design, 2J88U. The PSNE is by the end of the year, 12/2024. And another project under design, 4J830. The RTL is shifted to 7/2025. Under construction, there are 15 projects. Project 2Q260. The CCA is by the end of the year, 12/2024. That concludes my report. Any
Thanks
questions?
very much. All right. With that in mind, we'll now move to item 10, the consent agenda. There are 9 items on the agenda. Does anyone wish to pull an item from consent? Hearing none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent.
Second by Alessio.
Doring moved, Alessio seconded. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? Perfect. Then we will move to our next item, presentations. First up is item 11.1, the NVTA project update. Grant Bailey, take it away.
Good afternoon, Chair Joseph, directors of the board. I'm Grant Bailey, Program Manager Engineer, and I'll provide a project update this afternoon. Thanks, Laura. Next slide, please. The first project we'll talk about is the Slossville Gateway Transit Center Building Modifications Project. Provided an update on this project in July, but just a quick refresher. This project will build out the first floor of this building on the south side, which is currently used as a storage and informal meeting space. We'll add a couple of offices, a meeting room and toilet facility, as well as expand our existing bus driver break room. We open bids for this project yesterday. Our engineer's estimate was $850,000, and our apparent low bid came in at $724,000, which is a welcome change to, I guess, recent market conditions and how we've been receiving bids, and hopefully that's indicative of the future and how we receive bids moving forward. Next month, we intend to award this contract pending your approval and anticipate starting construction in mid-January. This project should take about 4 months to complete, and that should wrap up in April or May of 2025. Right now, we're estimating about $1 million construction delivery cost well, I'll say actually project delivery costs. That includes pre-construction, construction contract, and the construction support services as well. Next slide, please. Another somewhat smaller project, but building off of a project we recently completed when we reconstructed the Amola Avenue Park and Ride, which completed about 18 months ago. Now, we've recently received funding to build out closed circuit television cameras and ETIDs, or electronic transit information displays. We'll be adding 3 CCTV cameras and 3 ETID signs. Those ETID signs provide real-time transit information to passengers on Vine Transit. We started design of this project earlier this year. It was delivered by Kimley Horn. We got our final design in June. We bid that over the summer and awarded it to 2 separate contractors under 2 separate contracts due to funding source restrictions. That was required to be delivered under 2 contracts. The reason the board didn't see those contracts is they are under the executive director's award authority. So Director Miller awarded those over the summer, and we are now about to start construction on the camera installation later this month. We anticipate completion of that, the camera installs by the end of the year, and the electronic transit information displays will start installation probably in December and complete by February of 2025. Total project construction cost here is $250,000. Next slide, please. The Napa Valley College bus stop project. So we recently completed this project and put it into service at the end of August. As a refresher, we added 2 bus pullout areas across from the existing Napa Valley College bus stop. These 2 additional stops in northbound direction allow for elimination of a 10-minute service loop to our transit northbound routes, which reduces transit time by our transit operations time by 200 minutes per day. That project, as I mentioned, went into service in August, and we completed punch list items at the end of September, and you just through the consent calendar approved the notice of completion, which will work to get signed and finalized later this week. Total project delivery cost for this project was $925,000. Next slide, please. Sawscall Junction project. Just last month in September, we held a grand opening event. Many of the board members were in attendance. Just want to extend my thanks to the board for your support throughout this project. It's a huge asset to the community, and we're really looking forward to working on the next, congestion point at Airport, which I have an update on in a coming slide here. Just a few updates as we work to close this project out. Gelati Construction is working on final paving and striping here through the rest of October. And I hear as of just earlier today, the northbound 221 connector is not currently open, but it will be opened at the end of this week. Let's see. Otherwise, the contractor looks to move into punch list in November, complete some outstanding landscape and irrigation work, and have this project really wrapped up before the end of the year. Next slide, please. Vine Trail St. Helena to Calistoga project. So we're all well familiar with this project. I do want to note that we had some pretty intense discussions last board meeting about this project, but I didn't get a chance to, say, congratulations to the team. This was a major accomplishment, and, it's been said many times before, but I don't know if I got a chance to say it. So, congrats to Gelati Construction, the NVTA staff, Vine Trail Coalition, Park Engineering, and all of our supporting contractors in getting us here. It was no shortage of challenges, but we got there, and we were able to open the project in August. It's taken us about 2 months to get all of the punch list items together. It's just short of 200 items, but our contractor Gelati started work today on that punch list, and they'll be working probably up to just before Thanksgiving to get that complete. Right now, as far as our PG&E claim goes, that was submitted to PG&E on September 30th. And I'm working with their claims department to supply additional backup information as requested. I will continue to keep the board informed of where we stand with this project. However, or with the claim, however, this will likely be our last update through the regular project update. Next slide, please. Now on to our next one of our two large projects that are ongoing, but we're just kicking this one off now with Caltrans is the SR 2912 Airport Interchange Project. Project objective here is to reduce congestion at the intersection of State Route 2912 and Airport Boulevard by reconfiguring the existing at-grade intersection into a grade-separated roundabout interchange, something very similar to what was just completed at Sausville Junction. So a little bit of background on this interchange. It was included in the environmental analysis of the Jameson Canyon project, and so we have a fair amount of documentation and previous environmental studies to build on to obtain a environmental revalidation. We're currently working with Caltrans to understand exactly what it is they need as far as revised and new environmental documents. And we are looking probably in the next month or two to contract with our on-call engineering and architectural support contractor, TY Lin, to provide these revalidated environmental documents. I'm told that it'll probably take 12 to 18 months to obtain the environmental revalidation and approval. And at that point, we'll be able to move forward with design. I've put a schedule on the slide here. It's very tentative. The first point, or the first, I guess what this kind of hinges on is approval of Measure U, as that'll provide a lot of funding to move forward the pre-construction phases of the project. But tentatively, the environmental revalidation will extend into 2025 and probably early 2026. Pending approval of the environmental phase, we'll then move into design and right-of-way, and then pending construction funding or receiving construction funding for this project, which is estimated to cost approximately $150 million. We are looking to start construction in 2030. Next slide, please. And then the last project I'll touch on here, not much of an update since the last update I provided on the SR 29 American Canyon Corridor project, but I do want to notify the board that we have targeted our first public meeting for late February or early March 2025 to update the public on our, I guess, engagement plan, the work that's been done since the project received the initiation document approval back in early 2023. And our consultant is currently working on continuing development of the alignment of the corridor, mostly around the roundabout alternative, which is alternative 2, but also looking at various lane configurations for this signalization alternative, which is alternative 1. With that concludes my report, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
I have a quick one on the American Canyon project. Pre-construction of 20 million, does that include right-of-way and design and everything else?
It does. Yeah, that's
Okay.
all inclusive.
So that, yeah, the right-of-way could become a real challenge, but okay.
It is a
Great.
significant portion of that $20 million.
Okay. Well, thank you. Any other questions? Director
Yes,
Alessio.
Grant, thank you for the presentation, the update. I know you do this on a quarterly basis. I always find it really inspiring and provides a lot of hope that we are getting things done, and you're doing a great job along with the staff and the people you acknowledge. So thank you for that. I have one small question regarding the Imola Avenue Park and Ride. There was a hold on being able to implement or install the EV charging stations because of a switch gear that was kind of back ordered, and there was some kind of holdup on that. I don't recall. Do we have EV charging stations there now?
We do.
Okay.
And thank you for bringing that up. I'm remiss in reporting to the board that that has been up and running now since, I believe, early July.
Oh,
So, yeah.
perfect.
Well, I should have included
Obviously, I
that in
don't use that park and ride.
my- That's all right.
But that's great. Okay, good, because I know that was a kind of there was a holdup there with the switchgear. The other on airport, I just have to mention, we all know that being able to address the backup, what we call airport, James Canyon 12 and 29 is absolutely essential. I hear this from our residents. We experience this. It's an environmental issue. It's a safety issue. It's economic development issue of allowing our workforce to come into this county every day and get home every day to the tune of 36,000 people that come in every day, 30,000 people that leave this county every day to work in places that they can afford to live here. We've got this disparity between where we work and where we can afford to live. I know that we're addressing that and we work on that and as we build more housing, but this is just an absolute must for every reason I can think of. I really hope that the voters will understand Measure U to know that this is a path forward, because if we don't get that, we're just going to be stuck in that traffic point, and it's just going to continue to be very, very challenging to get the revenues, the state and grant revenues, state and federal grants to produce the revenues to do this. It's a big project, but I'd like to just want to put that out there. I don't mean to make a pitch or a campaign pitch or anything, but just this is, I mean, South Saskell Junction is proof of concept that we can do big projects like this. And that's exactly what we need to do at this intersection. So thanks for the work in advance.
Totally agree.
Well, I
Director-
was going to say something real similar, so I will echo what Director Alessio just mentioned. This may be my last quarterly report from you, Grant, as a director. What I'm curious about, and it's either a question or just a comment if, you're not ready to answer. What interim improvements have we considered between now and the ultimate interchange project? For example, would one more lane between Saskell and the airport do anything? That seemed to be a reasonable interim improvement. So have we considered any interim improvements between now and the big project or not?
We have, and we are currently discussing those improvements with Caltrans. They have an upcoming shop project along the corridor. Some of the improvements that we've been discussing are, I guess the big one would be extending the left-hand turn lane into the existing median. Not sure exactly how far, but as much as we can get really to reduce the queue in the through southbound movement, as well as adding channelizers between the left-hand turn lane and through lanes to reduce those, I guess, last-minute cutovers from the through to the left hand. You're welcome.
and Director Pedrosa.
Thank you, Chair. Look, on airport junction interchange, totally get that we have to do it, but I do want to provide a dosage of reality. I think we have to understand what the funding package is and what that looks like. So if we're going to put a $200 million sticker price on it, I think for this to start not just becoming a fantasy, we have to start talking about what are the funding sources that we're going to be getting. Future MTC commissioners, might have to start working and trying to get some funding and prioritize that at the state and regional level. But if we don't do that, it's just going to continue to be nebulous. And just because we have renderings, and I'm not criticizing staff, by the way, you're doing your job, but this is on us of how do we get there? Measure U, when it passes, is not going to fund this entirety, but it's a great start. So to me, I think, the leadership in the board really has to maybe say, okay, what are the funding packages? What do our lobbyists help with? What do our regional representatives help with? And how do we start taking a bite-sized approach to it? Because that's a big number. And we're going to keep talking about it for multiple years if we just keep talking about it. So I would just challenge us to do that. When we've delivered projects, Saskell Junction, there was regional money. We got RM3, $20 million set aside. So I think this is going to be a big, request. And in terms of, that extending that lane, I'm not interested in talking to Caltrans. We just got to do it. So I can say that now. And then on American Canyon, and I'll say that to Dina too, as a colleague on MTC, just to be clear. On the American Canyon corridor, we've talked a lot about that project, and I think that's a good one, to Chair Joseph's point. We got some money to start advancing this, didn't we, Kate? Executive Director Miller, sorry.
Yeah, your American Canyon, so one of the things that we did, which was really smart, is that we submitted a letter of no prejudice request from MTC, who they approved it and
Really?
allowed us to advance Soskel Junction with other resources. And then we were able to get the $20 million in RM3 funds in the bank. Tony is watching the interest grow on that. We get a daily report. He's so excited about that. But anyway, that money, in addition to
Million
the
dollars.
$6 million in Measure U, if it passes, will be enough to get American Canyon and Airport shovel ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, and I just say that because I know American Canyon has been a focus and we've done quite a bit to bring some outside money to that. But I think in concert, those projects do work. So again, I appreciate the presentation. I just want to make sure that as we keep talking about it, the funding component is there and it's talked about just as much as the rendering. So thank you.
Right.
And
Director
lastly,
McGee.
thank you. I want to piggyback what Chair Alessio said, but also in addition to workforce commuting back and forth, it's really important that we think about the visitor experience, and we can't benefit from TOTs coming into our revenues if we can't get people here. People are going to go to Sonoma. So I don't know if there's any way to address that with Visit Napa Valley, who has a big budget, but if we can't have a customer or a guest experience without an hour delay of sitting in traffic, our TOT is not going to be the same. Also, Kaiser is another partner that requires that Valley residents are able to get through there to make appointments. So it might be another partner that we can look at. Then also, I just have a quick question regarding the ETID signs at the Imola Park and Ride. I am curious, do we have plans for adding those at any of our other park and rides, as we're looking to talk about technology later in the presentation? I think that kind of communication for riders is key.
Yes, so the other project, which wasn't included on the project update, is the Redwood Park and Ride, which will go, the improvements there will go into construction, I think, mid next year. We do plan to add ETID signs there as well.
Okay.
I'm not sure about the parking ride in Yountville.
That's a smaller one, but
No current plans, but I think we will be deploying additional real-time signage, as funding and as funding allows. Yeah.
maybe there's a way that the ETID signs can be available on an app too. I mean, if the information is being pushed out. So I'm sure you guys have discussed that in technology of.
I think
It is available now already. It just, and Rebecca's going to share as part of
I
her
know,
report
jumping
today,
the
some
gun.
of the technology challenges that we have associated with, the consistency on that. But we do have that. And as you know, on our shuttle services, we have the Ride the Vine app that also allows you to understand where the vehicle is. But yeah, it's always a work in progress, right?
Of course, I look
Yeah.
forward to hearing that presentation. Thanks.
Right. Director Sedgley.
Thank you. Yeah, since we're providing a little bit of commentary on this agenda item on the project update, I might as well throw in my 2 cents. But, I've always looked at capacity, increasing capacity. And that's been transportation's model in California for a long time. We've seen it in the county. And it does provide some temporary relief till the capacity moves someplace else. So we're looking at that all up and down the valley. So as a transportation agency, I always thought that maybe we should be, spending a lot of time on getting people out of vehicles versus providing more capacity in lanes. And hopefully in the future, that's where we'll go is, and we have a discussion later on in our agenda about trying to get people in a new transportation mode. So as we spend millions and millions of dollars on capacity, I think transportation agencies all over the state, and I think they are looking at how we improve public transit. And that's a big lift, but I think it's the right direction to go. Thank you.
All right. Director Eisenberg.
All I want to say is I completely agree with Director Sedgley.
All right. This is true. All right. Before we conclude, I also want to mention that clearly, as Director Pedrosia pointed out, our next MTC representative needs to be really inspired to be looking out for wherever he or she can find $140 million. So that's my takeaway. All right, we're now ready to move to item 11.2, the countywide active transportation plan update. And Patrick Band, you're up.
Not that one. There we go. Oop. Great. Thank you, Chair and board members. Patrick Band, Associate Planner with NVTA. Wanted to introduce today the countywide active transportation plan. We'll be joined today by several representatives from our lead consultant, GHD. I wanted to kind of introduce the plan overall, hand it off to GHD, and then we'll be able to wrap up with any questions and some next steps. So back in July, this board approved a contract to move forward with a countywide active transportation plan development process. We held initial kickoff meetings in August and have been doing initial kind of preliminary work over the last couple of months to move forward in development of this plan process. Next slide, please. So today we'll give a quick introduction to the plan, then I'll pass it off to GHD to talk about scope and tasks, some of the timeline, the extensive outreach and engagement opportunities that we'll have throughout the next spring and summer, a demonstration of our new project microsite website, and then I'll bring it back to discuss some next steps and ways that board members can help our community get more engaged in this process. Next slide, please. So as you should all be aware, hopefully, what is active transportation? So this includes walking, biking, use of wheelchair or other assistive devices, e-bikes, scooters, and micromobility. Basically any mode of getting around that does not include a vehicle, a car, or other internal combustion use. So active transportation facilities are those facilities that support those uses. That obviously includes sidewalks, bike lanes, paths, and trails, but also includes those amenities that make it more safe, comfortable, or convenient for people to choose those modes. That can include lighting, benches, as well as a key connection to, as Director Sedgley mentioned, transit, making sure that people can walk to and from those transit stops throughout our communities. Next slide. We've done a lot of planning work at NVTA, and our local jurisdictions have done significant work as well over the years to look at how we can advance active transportation throughout our communities. Most notably, we developed a countywide pedestrian plan in 2016 and a countywide bicycle plan in 2019. This planning process effectively takes those two documents, which are getting a little bit dated, and brings them together into a single cohesive kind of unified plan that can be used to advance active transportation projects and programs in the years and decades ahead. Next slide. And the reason why is really simple. You know, we can develop these plans and they can sit on a shelf, but they don't really do anything. But what we're seeing over the last number of years is we have changes in population, both in size and demographics. We have innovation and best practices around active transportation, whether that's development of Class 4 separated bicycle facilities or additional improvements to pedestrian infrastructure, such as hawk signals or RFBs, flashing beacons for crosswalks that make it safer or more comfortable for people to choose those modes. We also have emerging community needs and interests. As people age or as our community changes, those needs and how people get around, particularly post-COVID, are changing as well. And then lastly, and perhaps most importantly, air quality, emissions, and climate change are things that are continuing to be kind of front of mind and ways that active transportation can serve as part of the puzzle in addressing those challenges. So I'm going to pass it over to our consultant team with GHD now. They're going to provide a little bit of a background and some of the next steps in terms of our planning process, and then we'll open it up to board questions. I believe, is Colin?
Yep, I'm here.
Hi, I'm Colin Brigette with GHD, and I'll talk first about the scope of work. So we have a scope of work that identifies 9 tasks, starting with project kickoff and review of existing conditions, developing uniform standards and a toolbox of treatments, and then moving into assessing future demand for bicycling and walking and active transportation. You can see on the board there. Tasks include public outreach, stakeholder meetings, and presentations. We'll be developing a policy framework of plan, goals, objectives, policies, and performance metrics. And then the ultimate plan will include recommendations for proposed facilities, recommendations for improvements, an implementation and funding plan, and then a document for your approval and adoption. And this will, of course, also include plans for each of the member cities within the county. Next slide, please. And so the class will essentially follow this timeline where we kicked off in August, and throughout the fall, we're going to be working on data collections and existing conditions assessment, which includes mapping all of the existing bicycle and pedestrian facilities throughout the county. We're going to be working with the Napa County Bicycle Coalition to map bicycle parking locations. And as part of that mapping, it'll be capturing some of the new treatments that have come on board in recent years, and we'll also be assessing the level of traffic stress for bicyclists, which is a key measure relevant to the ultimate recommendations. And then by winter, starting in January, we'll have materials ready for community and stakeholder engagement, which will include the products of the existing conditions assessment, all those maps and existing data. And then after beginning the outreach in the winter, by spring, we'll be ready to develop recommendations with the idea that from spring and summer, developing recommendations for and preparing that plan document that will be ready by next fall, with the goal of wrapping up the project by 1 year from now, October 2025. Next slide, please. So agency engagement opportunities, as soon as we wrap up our existing conditions tasks with those existing facilities maps, we'll have a treatment toolbox that identifies preferred improvement types for different kind of facilities, or urban facilities versus rural facilities. And we'll have our policy framework recommendations ready. That at that time we'll be ready for the initial agency engagement and meetings with the cities by the winter, and then by the summer, the engagement activities will have moved into presenting proposed facilities and proposed programs. Next slide, please. And as part of that engagement, we have created a project website that's active now at NVTA-TA.com. And it includes an interactive map that we'll take you through in a little bit, show you how that works as a way to provide input. And we've identified our initial in-person engagement opportunities with the idea that we'll have our first workshop in February with in-person outreach opportunities in Calistoga and American Canyon, and then future outreach events in the city of Napa and St. Helena. And we'll also be coming back to the board and NVTA committees for updates throughout the process. And so I'm going to hand off to Holly for our next slide.
Hey everyone. So during our community engagement process, we'll be employing the Livable Communities Framework, which approaches community engagement in a different way by encouraging positive interactions and building excitement about the plan. So traditional community engagement efforts may start by focusing on problems with the transportation network or potential improvements, but which can lead to community members really not knowing where to start or creating a negative error on the plan and what it might change about the community. Instead, the Livable Communities Framework prompts residents to identify what they love about the community, so the planning team can investigate ways to enhance the existing network and build more of what residents love. We also provide an opportunity for residents to tell us what they wish and wonder for the community encouraging residents to think positively about their future of where they live. In our experience, this approach has helped foster trust between the community and the planning team. And I just like to go ahead and share my screen so we can do the interactive map demonstration. I can show y'all the website we've been working on. Right. Is everyone able to see my screen? All right, great. So this is our website. This is just a little introduction to what the project is about. We go into a little more detail in the project background and have some relevant FAQs like why active transportation, what is an active transportation plan, and how the community can help by providing feedback. That gets us right into our Get Involved section, which hosts our interactive map and our survey. I'll be going through the interactive map in just a second. But I also like to show you guys this is where we'll host our upcoming public events, our project timeline, and we also have examples of complete streets projects or active transportation facilities so people can get an idea of the improvements that we might be making or recommending. Now I can click into the interactive map and it's pretty easy to use and I'll just show y'all how to use it. So this is what it looks like. When you open it up, it opens this welcome tab, which tells you a little bit about the project again and gives you instructions for how to use it. So there are 3 types of comments that someone can make on the interactive map. You could tell us what you love about your community, which is, we prompt residents to tell us how they like getting around town, what public spaces they enjoy spending time in, or what their favorite streets and trails are and why. We also provide community members to tell us what they wish for the community. So maybe how they wish to change getting around the community or what changes they wish to see in their streets. And finally, community members can tell us what they wonder about their community. So this could be how they imagine their community growing, what kind of transportation solutions they wonder about. And like we said before, the Livable Communities framework encourages positive interactions, but this comment type, the I wonder comment type, provides a place for community members to voice any anxieties or concerns they may have about the plan or how the plan will change where they live or their community. For example, someone might wonder if a new housing development is built, how this will impact traffic and how the plan will plan to address that traffic increase. Or if there's a trail they like to use, but they feel that the trail needs improvements, they might wonder when these improvements can be expected or how to ask for them. So that's just the welcome page. Once you click Get Started, you can choose I love, I wish, I wonder. You can zoom in on the map and decide, let's see, someone might like to use this golf course. So they'd say, I really enjoy this golf course and I love that I'm able to walk to it or something like that. And then their email will auto-populate, they'll press add comment, and then their comment will be posted for everybody to see, but their email will not be public. We've also created a boundary around the county. So if someone wants to drop a comment outside the county, they're unable to. So it really just focuses people to focus on Napa County and where they live. But yeah, so that's the interactive map on our website. If they'd like to go back to the home page, they can say back to home page and click this link and it'll direct them right there. So that's all I have for you guys today. Thanks for listening. And I'll pass it back to Colin.
Patrick. Sorry. So actually handing back to Patrick now.
Okay. It should be second to last slide. We'll advance a few through this. Next steps. There we go. Great. So thank you to GHD for providing a little bit of a preview of that mapping process and our forthcoming community outreach efforts. So as noted, we're going to have a lot of community outreach public meetings and community engagement opportunities. This website and the mapping tool is kind of the first step in that process. So for immediate next steps, we're asking NVTA board members to help us to publicize this site and this planning process. We'll be providing each of you with some social media graphics and some content that you can share in your various constituent newsletters or other communications you may have going out. From the NVTA staff side, we are already working closely with local jurisdiction staff to identify what local priorities are and ensure that as we move forward in developing a plan, as Colin said, this plan will include individual chapters for each jurisdiction to adopt as part of their existing general plan. So proposed improvements for facilities or programs will then be incorporated into an existing general plan, and when new development projects come forward, those can be conditioned accordingly by those local jurisdictions. So we want to make sure that as we're working through the planning process, that we're working hand in hand with local jurisdiction staff. We're also going to be providing updates to local agency committees and commissions. And of course, we're happy to come to any planning commission or council or board meetings that may happen where you'd like some additional updates. So that's the quick summary of where we're at with the countywide active transportation plan. As Colin mentioned, we will be wrapping this up roughly a year from now, but we want to get this public outreach effort underway kind of before the holidays so we can begin to get feedback from our local community members in terms of what their priorities are, really from the first steps of this process. Thank you very much, and we're happy to answer any questions.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. Any comments? I see Director Eisenberg's light first.
Thank you. I'm very much looking forward to the development of this plan, being a huge proponent of active transportation, mostly to get for good health and get people out of their cars. I have a caution on community outreach. I feel that it's going to be very difficult to get input from the people who probably need to voice it the most. And that's the people who are going to look at active transportation and just say, that's too dangerous. I'm not even interested. And it's somehow we have to reach out to the people to even consider riding a bicycle to work or to the store. And it's sort of a chicken and the egg thing. What are you going to do? You can't get people behind you until they feel safe. You can't get anything done till you have people behind you. And just a real dilemma. And it doesn't take me a survey to know that the main reason people do not use active transportation is they are afraid.
Yeah.
And so good luck with that. I'm sorry, I'm not trying to.
Not at all.
I just want you to have that in the back of your mind, that kind of outreach will really be critical to get people on your side. And, you know, the kinds of car trips we're going to replace are going to be things that are only a few miles long. Very few people will commute from Calistoga to Napa. It takes way too long on a regular basis. But good luck, and I support the effort.
Thank you.
All right, moving around, Director Gregory.
Thanks, Patrick. Curious how granular this will get. I'm thinking of a few weeks ago, the Napa Bicycle Coalition presented to the county 6 specific bike projects that they, through their own private survey, suggest are the top 6, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is that the kind of thing we want to incorporate into this, or is this too big and broad?
No, we will be getting fairly granular in this process, as we have for the 2019 countywide bicycle plan, which identified specific corridors for improvements and the types of improvements that were recommended for those corridors or facilities. In addition, part of the existing conditions assessment will look at where there are existing sidewalks and therefore sidewalk gaps, and where sidewalk gap closure projects could enhance active transportation use. So we will be getting fairly granular in terms of, you know, where projects could or should be located. I do again want to say that we are going to be working very closely with each jurisdiction to identify projects that are not just kind of pie in the sky that might not get developed for 20, 30, 40 years, but are really more implementable in the kind of nearer term, in that kind of 5 to 10-year window. And I think that's often been the challenge with past planning efforts, particularly around active transportation, that we can have this long list of potential projects, but realistically, what can actually get done that's going to, as Director Eisenberg said, kind of move the needle and get those people who might not feel like active transportation is for them, potentially out walking or biking for those shorter trips.
All right, Director Alessio and then Director Williams.
Thank you. Thank you for the presentation. We've seen a lot of plans. We've invested a lot of money in plans, and here we have another plan. But if it gets us into movement, if it gets us into where we can get grant dollars, state or federal funding to help us implement these plans, to create a healthy, safe community in terms of active mobile transportation for those who can. As we know, we're in an aging population here, you know, I know there's also a senior transportation plan that's underway currently also. We know with all the current plans that you have listed, along with the community health and needs assessment that was done with the county recently, and then community health improvement plan, that transportation is identified need overall, especially for older adults and the more vulnerable communities. And I agree with Director Eisenberg that the number one reason that we don't have kids walking or biking to school or other people doing this for work is a safety factor. And that goes back to investment in infrastructure to ensure we have at the city of Napa, you know, we have a policy of complete streets. So you'll see right now that we are investing $3.7 million in Salvador from Highway 29 to the point of the county. Unfortunately, the county, and not to throw my county friends, you know, under the bus, but there's no bike lane on that extension from the county to Big Ranch Road. There's a very important connector there. And, you know, but it takes, at the end of the day, it takes investment in ensuring that those really important areas have that opportunity for safe travel, that's multimode travel. And there's many, many more other opportunities. I really hope this will encourage the city and the county public works to continue to work together closer, and maybe the county will implement some policies through this. I know the county's got a general plan that's going to be underway. This all falls within our general plan. As you know, we've got Browns Valley, which is going to include a class 4 transportation, class 4 bike lane, which is a vertical barrier, which is exciting. I'm not sure what the full investment is on that. I know at least $3.5, maybe $4 million on the Browns Valley. We're going to be working on the Jefferson Street, making sure there's bike lanes on Jefferson Street, complete streets there. So, you know, I want to pat the city of Napa on the back in terms of moving forward. And again, we just finished our general plan, and we have a policy of complete streets to be able to provide that safety for multimode. And so I'm a little bit on my soapbox here, but I guess at the end of the day, my point is I'm going to look forward to when this planning process is done, because we have a lot of plans, and it sounds like you're going to be incorporating the other plans that are already existing, including, please also note, the Area Agency on Aging also has, they finished a plan about a year ago. And of course, the Vision Zero, which is no severe injuries and fatalities, and Net Zero, which is net zero by 2030 on terms of greenhouse gases. I mean, there's a lot of already intention and commitment there. If we can pull that together into this active transportation plan, you know, that's great. But I'm looking forward to when the planning is done and we can make the commitment to invest in the infrastructure to support this. Thank you.
All right, Director Williams.
Thank you. So I guess I'm wondering what's driving this in the first place. I see, you know, changing population and emerging community needs and interests. Do we have compelling information that the population has changed so much, or that the community needs and interests have changed so much that the existing plans, which are mostly not very old, are rendered obsolete or not useful? How, you know, what what is going to be different at the end?
Sure.
When all of this work is done?
No, it's a valid question. I think a couple pieces to that answer. One is that things are changing and have changed, particularly after COVID, in terms of people's commute patterns and expectations around transportation have changed pretty significantly. At the local jurisdiction level, we're also looking at those plans that in some cases are approaching a decade or more in age. And what we're seeing is that there are some facilities that, based on innovations in active transportation best practices, may not really reflect what's most appropriate. So in Calistoga, for example, you might look at the new Class 4 that's on the Berry Street Bridge, which was not in an existing plan that the city moved forward with directly kind of on their own volition, but that there may be additional locations within the city that are appropriate for that type of treatment. And by having those in a plan that is adopted by the jurisdictions and by NVTA, we're more able to pursue grant funding or other dollars to actually move those from concept to completion.
And I would just add that it is essential for a project to be in the plan in order to qualify for a lot of federal and state funding. And we have accomplished a lot since the last time we adopted a plan. So those projects that are in there, just to acknowledge that they have been completed and be able to show them on the map so that people understand the infrastructure that is there. And also, I think, it says a lot about our jurisdictions, about NVTA, about how much has been built over the last 4 years. And I think it's also, to Patrick's earlier point, that trends have changed a lot. I don't think we had Class 4 in our last plan.
No.
That's a whole new way of delivering a pretty safe way to get around for bicyclists that we don't have now. And so I think it's another tool in the toolbox.
So the existing NVTA plans that are listed here are at the most, let's see, 8 years old, and most of them are 2 or 3 or 4 years old, perhaps. So when this anticipated study and project is completed, will another one be needed in 3 or 4 years?
So I think there will always be the need to look at what our past performance has been, what's been completed since the plan has been adopted, and kind of where we want to go as our communities are changing. What, again, this plan seeks to do is largely bring together that 2016 pedestrian plan and the 2019 bike plan, focusing on those active transportation users, but also reflect some of the lessons, the learnings, and policies and programs that are in that long list of other plans that have been developed subsequently, so that we can be consistent in the plans that have been adopted by local jurisdictions. And Kate,
Yeah, and I would just say that we have a funding agreement with MTC that requires that we update our plans. So that is one of the key drivers. The other thing is that we have new communities popping up everywhere. Without updating our plans, then those communities kind of get left out, right? Right now, we have River Sound that's coming online, and a few other places. So I think it's important for us to always be making sure that we're keeping pace with development and policies.
Thank you. And is this project already budgeted?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. One quick question for me. A comment and a question. Number one, this is essentially integrating the pedestrian plan and the bike plans. So from a structure perspective, it's blending that. And then secondly, those plans usually had a breakout for each jurisdiction. So it's kind of like American Canyon's version of an active transportation plan within the countywide.
That's right. And that's the same approach that we'll be taking this time with the active transportation plan, is to have a dedicated chapter for each jurisdiction that can be adopted into the local general plans and then have that same force of law.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Any other comments? Or okay, then this is an information item only. So we're encouraging everybody to get the word out as it starts unfolding. So now, go ahead.
Thank you. Could you send that presentation to us by email?
Of course.
Please? Thank you.
Okay. All right. Now we're moving to item 11.3, the 2025 state legislative update. And
So I want to introduce our state and federal law advocates. Steve Wallach is with Platinum in Sacramento, and once he provides the state update, then either Jessica On or Tony Hobbs will provide the federal, though maybe they'll tag team. Yeah, they're going to tag team it. Go ahead, Steve.
So I'll do the minutia issues at the state level. So I'm Steve Wallach with Platinum Advisors in Sacramento. It's good to see you all again. Is this on?
Is your mic on?
Yeah, okay. So I'll make sure to talk right into it. So I'll do a brief overview of this past year of the legislative session and kind of what we kind of expect for next year going forward. So this year, the legislature sent the governor over 1,200 bills for signing and vetoing, which is a record amount. Usually it's about 1,000, so it's 200 more than normal. He did veto about 16%, which is on par with past years. Most of the reasons for vetoing those bills, the fiscal situation the state faces with the budget deficit this year, and the potential for one going into next year. But so far, on the fiscal side of things, the state's revenues are fairly stable. Through the October numbers, we're about 1.7 billion ahead of the projections for the fiscal year. Numbers keep on keeping a little stronger. September numbers that aren't out yet, but should be out this week, show that income tax levels are about 1.8 billion more than they were projected for the month alone. So things are looking good. So hopefully keep our fingers crossed. We're not going to have a huge surplus, but hopefully not a huge deficit either. So right now the legislature is gone finally until December 2nd. We'll come back and do an organizational session, swear in new members and reelected members. It was extended a little bit longer than expected because of the special session on gasoline fuel price spikes. That was finally completed on Monday with the Assembly concurring in the Senate amendments to that legislation. Couple of weeks ago, the Assembly started this off with informational hearings, and then they actually adopted two bills that moved to the Senate. The one was the governor's proposal on fuel supply requirements by refiners, and another one regarding E15, which is ethanol with 15%, gasoline with 15% ethanol content. California is the only state that doesn't allow for it. The Senate decided just to move ahead with the governor's proposal and kind of put the E15 proposal over till next year to continue discussions with that. So right now they're gone until December. The work really doesn't start until they come back in early January, about January 3rd or 4th, right around there is when we expect them to come back. As far as legislation, I'm not going to go through all the bills in that list, but just highlight a few of them that we've been following and supporting. AB 1904, this is what they call the Yield to Bus sign bill. It's based on a pilot program over several years in Santa Cruz and some, I think, Monterey, that allowed them to put lighted signs where buses, when they're trying to re-enter the traffic flow lane, that it would light up to inform motorists that they're supposed to yield. This would apply that same standard statewide, but it also would allow for just a static, like a sticker, to inform motorists that they're supposed to allow buses to yield back into it. It's been, I think, somewhat successful. I think the biggest obstacle they had in other areas is trying to get enforcement with the local police departments that this is something motorists are supposed to do, but that was now signed into law, so it's an option for transit operators to pursue. AB 2719, this is a bill NVTA co-sponsored with Solano Transportation regarding the inspection requirements on I-80, requiring buses periodically to pull over and be inspected. Passengers get off, major delays in services and major impacts to on-time performance. Bill was held in the Assembly Appropriations suspense file because of Caltrans's objections and the cost of the bill. We did have conversations with CHP. They did point out that there might be some other options. So since it was held, someone, Lori Wilson, as well as Guara Curry and Senator Dodd, signed a letter addressed to the CHP commander in the Bay Area, asking them to meet to discuss what those options are. So we are waiting a response from them. They have not responded yet, so we are going to bug them again and potentially go back to CalSTA to ask them to follow up with us on what those options are. Because if they're not reasonable or potential options, then we want to reintroduce the legislation again next year and move forward with that. Hopefully with a better fiscal situation, we can get it go moving forward as well. Other bills that we supported, SB 960. This is the Complete Streets bill by Senator Wiener. He's tried this in the past. He's gotten into the governor's office and has been vetoed. On the last time it was vetoed, Caltrans adopted policies that kind of try to implemented these complete street requirements. Many thought Caltrans has not really implemented those policies as stringently as they'd like. So he introduced SB 960 this year to put them in statute. This bill was signed into law, so it would be a benefit, particularly for places like in Napa, where a lot of your main streets are state highways. So it requires Caltrans to incorporate bicycle, pedestrian, as well as transit facilities in their planning and shop programs for state highway improvement projects. And so that's, I'm gonna leave it at that for those bills. And so for next year, I mean, legislation that might come back is, one is our inspection bill. We might have to proceed again. And then hydrogen has also been a big issue this past year, a growing issue with state's award of $1.2 billion in federal funds. There's a lot of discussions on streamlining hydrogen projects for both heavy duty as well as light duty vehicles. There's also a major kind of debate over what clean hydrogen means. So that is something that didn't get addressed this year. That likely will come up next year with the passage of SB 1420. Cap and trade has been discussed to start the renewal process of the cap and trade program. It's authorized until 2030, but they want to try and start it early in order to provide some stability and in the marketplace for when they're planning and on the auctions to maintain that stability in the prices there. And then last but not least, as what was mentioned earlier, the regional transportation measure is going to be hopefully something in print next year to move forward to put on the ballot in 2026. That's always going to be a controversial effort. So hopefully the agreement reached at the regional level is pretty strong and well supported, and to make it go a little more smoothly next year. So that's kind of it right now. Kind of did really quickly. I don't know if you have questions about that or other bills. Anything else you may want to discuss?
Well, thank you very much for the report. Are there any questions or comments? Director Alessio.
A quick one. Are there any bills that really support public transit and be able to expand public transit? We know the fiscal cliff and all the concerns, because it's really hard to get more access and encourage riders in terms of more rural areas, because we don't have the funding to support more frequent, consistent public transit to our communities. And then we know that's a solution.
Well, I mean, the
It's
regional
an
measure.
equity issue too.
Yeah, the regional measure could help with that. If they do a regional sales tax or whatever revenue source they do, it's mainly going to be there to provide, stability for the existing service levels, but also could actually expand that. Whenever they open up the cap and trade discussions, there's a whole host of funding programs that are tied to that. Could they change how that money is allocated? Currently, a big chunk of it goes to transit, or either like what they call LC-TOP, the Low Carbon Transit Operations Program, TRSIP money as well, where they could, redirect that for more transit. There's some, strings, I mean, whether it's like gas tax money can't be used for transit capital or operations.
I'd rather not pay an additional sales tax on this issue, budgeting or some kind of something to help us with this.
And then, I mean, in the future, whenever they get to the point where they want to look at, changing from an excise tax on fuel to a vehicle miles traveled fee, that opens that up to potentially for transit as a source of revenue.
Thank you.
I would just add that, this upcoming year in October, the report to the legislature on SB 125 is due. And, I think everybody around that table, including myself, is hoping that translates into some sort of new operating dollars for transit. But it's going to be a tough one. And it's also going to have to be something that probably goes to a vote. I think we would really like to push for a doubling TDA.
Yeah, I mean, that'd be a vote, as well as maybe just cleaning up how TDA is allocated. It would make things a little more, I don't know, efficient, but make some improvements there within existing resources. But increasing TDA would require a vote as basically a tax increase.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for being here.
No, thanks.
All right, Director Eisenberg.
Thank you. Could you repeat the number of the Wiener Complete Streets bill?
Oh, SB 960.
960. I'm very intrigued by when you mentioned that there would be impact on state highways that go through towns. And I was wondering if there's a good place I could find out more information about what the possible impacts could be.
I could try and send you something. Either there's some good committee analysis on the bill, but also, Cal Bike has some good write-ups on it. They're one of the main sponsors. And so there's a lot of other areas. I mean, it just requires them when they're doing their planning purposes for the shop and other long-term planning that they incorporate these type of facilities in that work.
Okay, thank you.
So just a note on that, the link to on our bill matrix, the link to on the number, you can click on it and it'll go to the actual bill itself. I mean, I can provide that to you as well. But the thing that I think we're holding Caltrans more to task, and I think where we're getting more success is asking them to use their shop money for upgrading the bike and pedestrian facilities. And we've been successful on the Imola corridor. $5 million is being committed to various improvements on that corridor. And I think we continue to hold them to task when they start developing their shop program. So I think that is probably ultimately, I mean, it would be great if this passes. It's probably never going to pass. Something like that, but I think it's for us locally, the best thing to do is really monitor how they're spending their shop money.
Yeah, okay, because this would allow them to do it upfront, where in the past, it's always been once they put out the plan, then people fight to get the improvements in there.
Okay, good. A couple of comments. Using that same shop strategy for the American Canyon Multimodal would be an ideal funding source, particularly since we're already moving in that direction. So.
Mention that because there's $20 million in the shop right now, and we're hoping, we don't want them to go pave 29 when we could use that money to help us move that project forward. So we are working with them on that.
Perfect, thank you. And then the other one, just to comment, the green hydrogen, I think is, for me at least, is an important item because I do think down the road that might be a more viable fossil-free source than batteries. But
Yes, and I mean, well, to me, it's always going to be a mix, depending on how the use is, and providing a clear definition of what clean hydrogen is and green hydrogen. There's a whole rainbow of descriptions out there, and that's been the debate.
Okay, very good. Well, this was an information item, and I appreciate it. And we'll use that in a few minutes when we talk about our advocacy program. But for now, let's switch to our federal legislative update, peoples. Item 11.4.
Hi, everyone. Jessica Ani with Platinum Advisors. Great to be with you here in Napa.
And I'm Tony Hobbs. Thank you for having us all.
Throughout the year, currently the House and Senate are both in recess and will remain so until after the election. But kind of throughout the year, we have seen the appropriation process in the House be a fairly partisan process. However, Speaker Johnson has managed to kind of struggle to unify his caucus, kind of move the process and his priorities forward. We saw this again in September when they were in session for about 3 weeks. The main focus was continue to fund the government before they all recess for the election. Speaker Johnson had wanted to pass a continuing resolution, which keeps the government funded throughout March. It's at the same levels. And wanted to attach a legislation that would ban non-citizens from voting. This was ultimately unsuccessful due to kind of internal disagreements within his party, and they ended up passing a bipartisan continuing resolution through December 20th. In the House so far throughout the appropriations process, we have seen they've passed 5 of their spending bills out of 12. These have all been passed on a partisan basis. In the Senate, they have not brought any of their appropriation bills to the floor. However, all of those have passed through the committee on a bipartisan basis. So they kind of start in a better place for bicameral and bipartisan negotiations, which could occur in the lame duck session after the election. Speaker Johnson has been adamant that he is not interested in passing kind of a massive omnibus spending bill at the end of the year. That's kind of standard operating procedure on Capitol Hill these past few Congresses. It's something that rank and file House Republicans really wanted to stop doing once they took over the chamber. So at this point, how a lame duck session will look will be a huge factor in how the election outcome if they end up trying to pass an additional funding bill or kind of continue to kick the can down the road with another CR. Since the election is the main thing that everyone's focusing on in DC right now, I want to touch a little bit on that as well. The presidential election continues to be very close. Polls continue to show a tightening as we get closer and more voters are kind of tuning in to the election. Vice President Harris still has multiple paths to victory through the Electoral College with the kind of blue wall, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, all very close, and then additional states such as Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, with which President Biden won in 2020. And then North Carolina is another state they're paying a lot of attention to, which was very close in 2020. Looking at the Senate, that's a very challenging map for Democrats. They pretty much need to run the table to keep control of the Senate. They're pretty much guaranteed to lose one seat in West Virginia with Senator Manchin retiring. The next most likely to flip is Senator Tester in Montana. The polling has not looked very good for Senator Tester. However, he always defies the odds. People kind of always count him out, and he ends up pulling up these upsets. He's a uniquely good fit for Montana, and probably one of the highest approval ratings of any senator in the country. But with Trump being on the ballot and the base voters he's able to turn out, especially in a state like Montana, that does create additional challenges for him. So it remains to be seen if he's able to pull off another upset. Next, most competitive would be Ohio with Senator Brown. This is another example of a really unique fit for that state, probably the only Democrat that can win statewide. But he has continued to have a small lead in all the polls. The rest of the competitive races really have a lot of overlap with the swing states in the presidential race: Arizona, Nevada, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. We've seen throughout the campaign, the Senate candidates polling a little bit ahead of Vice President Harris. That's starting to tighten in again. And just something to kind of know, in 2016 and 2020, you saw the same party win both the president and Senate race in any state, in any of the swing states. So reasonable to think that would kind of happen again. Looking to the House, there's probably only about 25 toss-up rates, so the playing field is fairly small. It's likely you'll see similar margins in the House, no matter who kind of takes the chamber. You're going to continue to see these close margins till there's redistricting again, likely. There is good pickup opportunities for Democrats, especially in California and New York. Reasons to believe that Democrats will do well there because there's Democrat enthusiasm, especially in California with Vice President Harris. So there definitely is an opportunity for Democrats to take the chamber. But again, we kind of expect it to be close either way. So you have anything to add?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. And, Jess was being very studious and not predicting anything, which we're going to try not to do here. However, I do think it's important to note this sort of common wisdom in Washington right now is that both chambers are expected to flip. They're going to be very, very close. However, it does look like that's the case, irrespective of which party ends up in control of either chamber. The way the math is looking right now, there is no wave election. Neither party has a mandate going into the electorate right now. So whichever party comes out on top in both chambers, they're going to have very tight margins, something we've seen the last two Congresses, particularly in the Senate. That's likely to continue. And what that means for you all is that we go back to this kind of lowest common denominator legislating, where it requires just true massive impetus in order for Congress to act on legislation. We're very likely to see that going into the next Congress. I try to come here and bear good news. However, the stagnation and the gridlock that we've seen in Congress, to be perfectly honest, being there, we're not seeing signs of healing. Nobody's standing up and saying, hey, this is crazy. We're still seeing a team sport being played between both parties. That's going to obviously not get better in the final 20 days before the election. So expect to see that ramp up. One thing I have noticed kind of looking into the polling, and as manic as the polling has been, the electorate is pretty solidified. They feel like they know who the candidates are. They feel like they know where they stand. And that's why you're seeing these polls that are quite tight in these swing states, because they are purple states. They're about 50-50 when it comes to their partisan makeup. You're seeing, it doesn't seem to matter what Kamala says, does not matter to see what Trump says. The polling just kind of stays pretty static. Again, expect to see that continue right up through the election. They've made their minds up. The other big kind of quirk I would say to this election is, as Jess said, typically if a president wins a state, that Senate candidate has an extremely good chance of winning as well within that same party. we may see some surprises this year. As Jess said, Senate candidates on the Democratic Party are polling several points higher than Vice President Harris to the outside of the margin of error, which is fairly uncommon. Senator Tester is probably the best example. He's polling almost 10 full points higher than Vice President Harris. So there are possibilities of swing vote, what we call kind of cross-party voters, people voting for one party at the top of ticket and then going back to their kind of traditional voter registration or voter identification for the rest of the way down. So do keep an eye out on that on election day. More than any other one, I would think that this may be one that we don't have kind of wrapped up on that Tuesday night, just because we are going to have so many close races in so many different states.
Thank you for the report, Ed. And yeah, I guess in national elections, what is it, a close race will be exciting news to watch, but probably the only consolation, because so little gets done and it's such a tight race, that it probably doesn't matter what the outcome is, because if your party doesn't win, the other side will probably prevent anything from getting done and vice versa. So I'm trying to become an optimistic pessimist.
I agree with you. The way to look at that, I would
yeah.
say, is the odds for extreme changes in the next session are fairly low, and that is a good thing. You know, we're not going to see a supermajority on either side that can come in and drastically change the way we've been doing business. For you all particularly, we have the added insulation of being right in the middle of a highway transportation bill. The bipartisan infrastructure law set that right through to 2026. So this next session of Congress won't be able to do anything too wonky with transportation funding either way.
Right. Good. All right. Other than being depressed, is there any other comments? Director Alessio.
Thank you for mentioning that. I was going to ask you, you know, the funds from ARPA funds and the Infrastructure Act funds are going to come to an end before the next presidential election. And are there outcomes that encourage support to continuing that that kind of policy in the future, regardless of the outcome of this election?
Yes, you know, I think the Biden administration, when he was still running again, they were looking at a Biden 2. The DOT was very interested in doing like a second infrastructure round. It's probably going to be more challenging in the Senate, even if just because you've lost some of those deal makers that kind of want to do those things. But I think, you know, infrastructure is something that has been bipartisan.
Good.
And there could potentially be ways forward.
Yeah, the original bipartisan infrastructure law, I think, is a marquee way of how to get good governments done in a tight political environment. It required compromise. It required both chambers kind of putting their egos on the side. As a former House staffer, I can say when it comes to this appropriations, things like that, the Senate typically wins. It is the upper chamber. But, you know, the Senate gave a little bit to the House in a lot of those. And what that meant was that Democrats were giving to Republicans, and you ended up with a truly bipartisan bill that was able to get through. Yeah, it will look, as when I think I say this, Democrats tend to put a little bit more funding into things, just kind of generally. So the more Democrats are in control in Congress, I think the higher you'll see some of those funding levels. That said, it does not mean that that's a 1-to-1 ratio by any stretch.
Well, there's a lot to be said for prevention and intervention will save you money in the long run. And I think that's kind of if I can say, that's a view of that party. Not to say the other doesn't understand that, but I do think there is that more of the emphasis on prevention and intervention for the greater good and the greater, you know, expanded cost it would be if we didn't do that kind of work. In terms of a contested race, I'm sure there's gonna be a lot of, you know, either way. Is there a plan in place in DC or throughout the states that you're hearing that they're gonna address a contested election outcome?
So we have a process for that.
Have you heard?
It worked last time, it barely, but it did work last time. No, so, you know, the certification process in DC is a pretty stolid and stoic process. If you ask members of Congress, they would tell you that was not the problem with the last transition. It was the former occupant and the way that he kind of spoke to folks. So I think people are pretty comfortable in their institutions right now.
Okay.
I may have a completely different answer for you on November 6th, but right now I think even Democrats in the House and Senate, they believe that the institutions showed their strength the last time around. And to my knowledge, there has not been any formal change to how we do a transition process.
Okay, thank you for making the travel out here. Appreciate it.
Of course, we're always happy to make a trip to Napa.
One last quick comment. The legislation that did get passed 2 years ago, the bipartisan infrastructure, the Inflation Reduction Act, the CHIPS and so forth, they're still intact. Is it likely that those authorizations will continue, or is there an annual appropriation that could be
So
torpedoed?
appropriations still have to happen. So the bipartisan infrastructure law carries through to 2026. So
Right.
funds are authorized through to 2026. They will still need to be appropriated, and partisan makeups will have a bearing on how much of that does get appropriated. But, you know, the box is there to be checked already.
Okay, so there's reason to hope that there will be some amount
Yeah.
of funding to do the kind of transportation we need to do.
And just to clarify, so transit funds need to be appropriated every year, our operating dollars, which is different than the highway funds that get, you know, our formula highway funds are on obligation authority. So those flow. The earmarks and the grant, you know, competitive grant programs, those all have to be appropriated too. So there's, you know, some funding that we get, and then there's a lot of funding that is very tenuous every year. And one of the issues with the continuing resolution is that Tony has to go through every time there's an extension to get a grant approval, so that there's that incremental money that we're getting. Otherwise, we can't draw it down. We have to wait for Congress to act. So I don't know. Is that pretty consistent with what you guys know? All right, I just wanted to make it clear for you how those impacts that we have on our revenues when this goes on.
All right, suffice it to say, things would be better if everything worked the way it was supposed to, but
When I first got into this business, used to work that way.
all right. If there's no other comments, that was for information only. So thank you very much for being here and providing us with the insights.
Thank you.
And to some extent, item 12.1 is kind of related, so don't go too far. This is the 2025 Federal and State Legislative Advocacy Program and Project Priorities and Federal and State Legislative Update.
Yes, so this is kind of a continuation of the presentations you heard. Danielle Schmidt's here to present item 12.1, the 2025 Federal and State Legislative Advocacy Program. Annually, this body adopts a legislative platform that allows staff to advocate on policies and programs and projects, much like Director Pedroza was commenting earlier about advocating for new funding sources. Our legislative platform allows us to do that, or as Director Alessio commented on advocating for new transit operating funds. This is our key to advocating for those policies, programs, and projects. So the 2025 program adds a few funding programs on the state and federal under the state and federal headings. It also adds language around project delivery streamlining, funding methods, and adds transit-oriented development and passenger rail as priority projects. Attachment 3 through 5 provide the state and legislative updates that you just heard. And so with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you have on the legislative platform.
Do we have any questions or comments? Do we have the airport Jamison Canyon interchange in there?
Yes.
Okay, good call. All right. So what we're doing now would be to approve this updated legislative advocacy program. So.
I'll make a motion to.
Well, before that, we'll
okay.
have any public comment.
Oh, yes, of course.
So if there's no board comments, we'll open up to the public. Any policy wonks out there? Okay, then I'll bring it back and
I'll move to support the legislative platform as written.
Second.
Okay, moved by Alessio, seconded by Doring. All those in favor say aye. Any opposed? All right. Very good. We Staff has their marching orders. We'll probably get all this stuff approved or something like that. All right, now we're on to item 12.2, the Vine Transit update, which is an information item only. Becca, you're on.
Thank you, Chair Joseph, members of the board. Rebecca Schenk, the program manager for public transit, and we'll be giving you an update today on data from the first quarter of 24-25. So basically the last 3 months, July, August, and September. So we'll be touching on a few things. The first thing, if you want to move just kind of quickly to the second slide, is any kind of outreach and events. We'll go into some jurisdiction updates and a recent countywide survey, give you a little regional context, talk about communications in terms of real time that had been brought up at the last board meeting, and then finally cover ridership. So moving ahead 2 slides in terms of outreach efforts and events, you'll see there that it just has a list of some things we've done over the last quarter. Just to pick one randomly in St. Helena there, kind of a, I don't say a new user, but the Nimbus Arts Summer Camp, going to some of their events in and around or in and around St. Helena, I should say, has been using the St. Helena shuttle, which has been a nice recent addition this summer. Next thing we want to touch on the next slide and proceeding is kind of some jurisdiction updates. So something that Director Chateau had brought to our attention was that the St. Helena Unified School District, kind of mirroring something that happens in Napa, now has a new schedule on Wednesdays. So as a result, starting next Monday, will be, and I guess starting next week, and it will consequently impact Wednesdays, we'll be running an earlier time on the St. Helena school shuttle. So if you know of things like this or changes happening in your jurisdiction, we're happy to kind of respond to those. I know we had some students getting late to an American Canyon for they called period T0, which I guess you can start earlier than some other students. So we made some adjustments earlier this year. So we're happy to make changes like that. The next thing on the next slide I wanted to talk about, and this actually gets a little bit at what maybe Professor Eisenberg brought up before on a bike and pedestrian item, but getting feedback from those who are not interested. So this is basically, in this case, on the transit front, but we did do a random text survey out to all registered voters or a portion of registered voters in each of the jurisdictions. And we got a total of 1,400 responses. The survey was available in English, Spanish, and Tagalog, although we did have a very low percentage of Spanish respondents. And it was trying to get at a lot of things. We might do a deeper dive on this at a future meeting, but one of the things was trying to get at where did all the transit riders go, right? Because we know that us, like many transit agencies, do not have the type of ridership that we've seen prior to COVID. So I'll touch on a few things, really emphasizing the city of Napa. So on the next slide, you'll see, and this bodes well for Measure U. What is your biggest transportation issue, right? Facing the area where you live. In terms of the city of Napa, right, their number one item being poor road conditions. And then with transit on the English side of things coming in with not enough convenient public transit options kind of at number 3 and maybe that 18% range. When you looked at the demographics of our English speakers, we're talking here usually pretty high income over 100,000. And predominantly it's self-identified, but they be identifying ethnicity as white. Our Spanish speakers, which granted is only 2% of our respondents here, but they had a really different take on this, right? So their number one, when asked the same question, right, is not enough convenient public transit options. And so hopefully, and if you remember at our last board meeting, we did approve a full-time position, and we're advertising that now specifically for Spanish language outreach to kind of meet this, because it does seem like they're a different group and have a little bit different set of needs. You know, poor road conditions is significantly lower on their list of needs. So then on the next slide, what you'll see in terms of what factors impact your use of public transportation. And then, yeah, there we go. Okay, what factors impact your use of transportation? They're saying, right, doesn't fit into my schedule, especially on the English side of things. And there is some consistency here, and that the bottom priorities, right, or they're identifying as changing work patterns, safety and health concerns, both in English and Spanish. So in a way, and again, this is self-report, but people aren't, you know what I mean, that health maybe or safety, what we hear from some other jurisdictions or what maybe you'd think, right, from COVID aren't showing up. And they're not saying that their work patterns have changed significantly. It's more of this maybe doesn't fit quite into my schedule, and maybe how we can kind of get at that is expanding our transit service and offering some more frequency there. And that kind of plays in on the next slide into what 3 improvements would you make to make public transportation better for you. So on the English language side of things, right, more frequent bus service. And this is what we've seen in the MTC survey of transit users as well, both in 2024 and 2019. So really trying to get there, hey, if we have an hour service down to Vallejo, an hour service up to Calistoga, what can you do to get 30-minute service or something on that front? And really what we see, especially in the English speaking side of things, is that St. Helena in particular really mimicked this side of things. So then moving on to the next slide and getting into Calistoga, and I just want to emphasize maybe a way in which they differed. So same kind of question, what is the biggest transportation issue facing you in the area where you live? So they're not as concerned at local roads. If you remember, that was really high in the city of Napa. Their thing is congestion on 29, because inevitably, right, even to go down their main street or to leave Calistoga, they're really dependent on that. And then second, in their case, came in not enough public transit options. And this, we also saw a pattern on the next slide in Yountville, also right along the 29 corridor. Well, they're slightly off to go north or south. They're really dependent on traffic conditions on 29. And then I can't even believe they put poor road conditions on there. That really doesn't seem fair. But regardless, I guess maybe one street isn't where they want their PCI score to be, and then followed by public transit. So this gave us some insight into things. And then in terms of a regional context, I'll explain a little bit more how I think this ties in nicely. So regionally, on the next slide, you'll see that we're really emphasizing transit 2050 plus regionally. So this is basically over the next, what's that work out to, 26 years or so, how transit would change across the 9 Bay Area counties. And they were doing pop-up events recently, one of which they did here at the Transit Center. So you'll see on the next slide with kind of the funding plan associated with that, and this is very much draft as it sits right now. So total enhancements and expansion and investments, it's 135 billion right over this roughly 26-year period across the 9 counties. So where this matters for us is you see in that transit expansion and enhancement, there's some near-term projects. So they've got 38 billion in that category. Right now, in that draft plan, we represent about 220 million of that. And so what we would like to see, right now, we're in that bucket. There's a lot of them, like, I don't want to say off the chart, right? People who want their project in there, but it isn't right there. I know City of San Jose, for example, is probably going to make a big play to try to get above the line into that $38 billion category. But I'm trying to retain that money for Napa moving forward and for NVTA. And what that would mean for us is you'll see on the next slide is this is all about like the change in frequency of the service. So we've known from our surveys countywide, which we just saw from our MTC surveys, that that's kind of what our riders want to see. So basically it would mean that we'd go from, the red, it should be 60-minute frequencies, and we would go to a 30-minute frequency in orange on the 10 and 11 and out to the Route 21. So essentially that 220 million roughly that we would have in that near-term project bucket, as they're calling it, would help us over this next 26-year period go from 60-minute service, which should be in red, down to the 30-minute service in orange frequency. So I think this would help us to get at it. So there could be a really, I don't want to say real funding sources on the horizon to help us try to accomplish that and get the buses and things that we would need to do that. So that's all I have on the regional front. And then in terms of communications, to kind of get at this real-time information topic and something that, is challenging for us every day. wanted to explain a little bit more what this means. So we have a CAD AVL system, which basically means an automatic vehicle location system. And so lots of things have to happen for basically you to look on your phone or for you to go out into the transit center bays right here and see where your bus is in real time, right? So one, the bus has to have a CAD AVL system. The router has to be functioning. The signal strength has to be high quality. So if you're going through Jameson Canyon, right, might not be your best day. Your driver has to manually clock into their individual route and a particular number associated with that. And then all that data has to go to the cloud and then come out in Google Maps, in the interactive map on our website, and then on the transit app. So that's when we say, hey, do you have the ability to do it on your phone and kind of see it in real time? That's what we have and what's available. So I'm just going to do a quick real-time version, and we can even look at this with individuals later. But so if you want to know where the Route 11 is right now, I'll just go through the top 3. So that's doing well today, right? I've seen an update within the last 15 seconds on that. So if you were waiting for that bus, it'd be good news. If you were waiting for the Route G, which would be the next bus coming, in the last 12 seconds, it's been there. So it should be moving well. Move down to the Route C, I can tell you where that's going to be, and I have active real-time information as it makes its way by Rolfs Manor. But if you're going, I wanted to get down to one that was not working well today. If you got down to the Route D right now, I couldn't tell you where it was on that list. And so that is kind of what we experience on a day-to-day basis. And so then we try to go in, right, and say, okay, you got to like reverse engineer it. Was the first question is kind of what bus was running that? Was it one with a CAD AVL system? And as we get new buses, every bus will have a CAD AVL system. So that could be like the simple answer. And if that's not the answer, you try to retrace the driver's steps in terms of what they were doing and then look at your router strength as well. So we're going to continue to work on this. I would encourage you to download the transit app and see kind of how we're doing. We do get reports from our Citizens Advisory Committee in particular, where they're really tracking things for us. And then another way we can track kind of where our buses are, not that the public can see it, but is radio communication. And so we've been using low band radios basically since NVTA formed. We inherited one low band system from the city and one low band system from the county for paratransit and for fixed route. We are finally now trying to bring those systems together within the city network to a high band system. We've been really trying to work with the city and county on this and the FCC who needs to be involved. But that would be another avenue in terms of maybe some help on that front from you and working with both of those entities. But if that goes well, we'll also have better communication kind of throughout the county on the radio. So at least if it's not showing up here and someone calls into dispatch, dispatch can radio the driver and know that way. So those are 2 communication things we're trying to work on. On the next slide, it just kind of shows you what dispatch sees on their end in real time, right? If it's red, that bus there, 658 is running down. If you're 302, you're right on time. You get a green, you're at 0. Something like 254 is deadheading, so it means it's kind of not to its route. But they're kind of regularly interacting with this system, and we keep trying to increase their training on that. In terms of ridership then, moving forward 2 slides, we'll just show you quickly, again, we're talking first quarter, so July through September, looking back 5 years now, 5 years now, essentially. It will show you basically since COVID how we've been doing. So as we know, right, we continue to grow on, say, something like the Route 10 quarter over quarter, even the Route 29, even though that is a low number of riders on the right pattern. And when we have more variability, say, on the Route 21, and then we still want to work on our City of Napa ridership, although right continues to increase at least from a prior to COVID level. On our next slide, you'll see the same thing for the history of on-demand, right? We continue to see an increased need for VineGo, and then we see some variability within some of the others, but both American Canyon and Calistoga have had strong ridership. And finally, if you wrap it all up and you look at all of the different services that we have on the next slide in terms of the change in ridership, if you're just looking at the first quarter, right, and going back from prior to COVID to now, we're still seeing over last year a 6% increase. So it's a slow go, but it continues to have increases. And we hope as we get more buses, as we get more information from our survey, that we can continue to inch that up. And with that, I'll answer any questions.
All right, well, thank you for that report and the additional information on communications and the others. Are there any questions? Director Doring, do you have a question or? Okay. All right. Any other comments? Okay. Well, then thank you for that information. And it was an information item only, so there's no action.
Chair, can we call for public comment?
Oops. Oh, sorry. Yes, are there any public comments?
I'd like to comment on that.
Great, sorry, and I apologize for just zoning out for a second. Go ahead.
Alan Tenscher from Yountville. Thank you for this opportunity to address you all. I really laud your efforts and your community service. It's a big job and often thankless. But I want today to address specifically the item that just passed on communication. I live in Yountville. I don't think you can find someone who really wants to do what Director Sedgley advocated, is get out of the car more than I do. In Yountville, I ride my bike everywhere. I sometimes commute down to Napa. But as a rider of the number 10, having real-time information with a bus that often comes only once every hour is essential, because we can call and say we're going to be late, or we're going to know that the bus really isn't coming at all because it's broken down. So instead of being a half hour late, I might be an hour and a half late. So any effort you can do to direct additional funding, perhaps away from something that is more pie in the sky to something that is more useful to the riders. I can't tell you, for me, if I'm an hour late, I might miss a doctor's appointment. But what about the cook who's sitting on the number 10 bus stop on Madison North that is trying to get to work, and he now is going to be an hour late? So again, thank you for your service. Thanks for this opportunity to address you, but practical solutions rather than pie in the sky, I think, would go a long way to get people out of their cars. We must have reliable information. When I've called dispatch, the good news is they almost always answer. The bad news is they don't have good information most of the time. They can't tell me where the bus is, or they tell me it's coming in 20 minutes. The last time I rode the 10 North to St. Helena, they said it would be in 20 minutes. The bus never came, and I had to take the next bus. So thank you for your time, and again, thank you for your service.
Thank you. Is there, I know we had a discussion about how it should work if everything was going good.
Another solution is, more operating dollars, and more capital dollars so that we can have more buses and more frequency. That would help a lot.
Right.
The other challenge is, we don't control the connectivity issue. That is something that is just endemic to this county. As we know, especially those of us who cycle anywhere off the beaten path, there's no connections. We have been working with our drivers on training to make sure that they're doing their share. And I think the one thing that we need to take a harder look at is whether or not we can actually upgrade our CAD/AVL system to something that actually works better. We don't know. We've been working on this now for 2 years, 3 years, but they're expensive systems. And so, yeah, we're focused on trying to do everything that we can to fix this. We just have limitations. And the bus situation, just not having enough vehicles right now is really making it hard. And we are going to be leasing some buses from Golden Gate, 3 of them, to serve as backup in this period where we have about under a 5% spare ratio. But the challenge is that there's very few manufacturers of zero emission buses, and that's what we're buying. Also, they're unreliable.
Okay. I was thinking more in terms of just the communication. Those systemic issues, you're right. But is there anything we can do to at least be able to say, okay, this route is canceled for breakdown or whatever?
Sure. I mean, I actually think in a way to get the dispatch knowing where the buses is, the biggest thing we could do is upgrade to these high band radios. We already have funding to do that. We do need some support though from the city and the county in our efforts to change our FCC license from one particular tower to another. That's been kind of an ongoing thing for us. So that would, at the very least, when we got a call in, they'd be able to have better radio communication moving from one tower that's currently at Montecito up to Sugarloaf. So I think that would probably be the most immediate thing. It's not really a high price tag. It's just trying to get some additional support from these larger communications departments that the city and county have. And then I think the next thing is, I mean, we can do in our existing CAD/AVL system, we could make a purchase of some additional routers, right? That's a few $100,000 probably proposition. And that gets at the bigger question, which, right, if we don't see in, say, the next 6 months, an improvement in the CAD/AVL system and with the routers, right, that would probably be about a $2 million investment if we were to, say, replace our CAD/AVL system. So I think that's kind of what we're looking at. Those are our 3 kind of immediate options.
Okay, thank you.
And with no guarantee that that would necessarily make the
Right. You could get
communications
a whole
better.
new
Yeah.
So that's going to be a very spooky decision to make, I think.
Right.
So I do think the biggest headache is when a route that's a few minutes late is an inconvenience, but it's the different from, as you was mentioning, when a whole route is canceled because of the truck or whatever, or the bus.
Right.
So
No, and I think you can get at that, right, at least by knowing that that's the case, so you
Yeah.
don't get that incorrect information in that 20-minute example when it's not coming.
Right.
But right, in terms of getting buses, how quickly can you get Gillig to manufacture buses on all those ones we have on order?
All right, well, thank you.
Yep.
Jerry, we've got 2 lights on. We got Director Mickey Cant and mine.
Perfect, thank you. Go ahead, Director.
Thank you. I'm curious with Director Eisenberg having a GPS tracker on his phone, how he can ride his bike from Calistoga and know exactly where he is every minute. It just seems like there's got to be some kind of a more of a, it's never simple, but some kind of a simple tracking app that works for
So-
cycling.
Yeah, I mean, right. We do have, like we were talking about, kind of that transit app. And what we find is you've got a router, and the router that's in the cabinet behind you, that's worked and sat there for the last 5 years, right? No problem. It has perfect weather conditions. It hasn't bounced. No one bothers it, right? When it's on a bus and it hits a pothole going down Jefferson, which they're paving today, so hopefully that'll be better. Or it's rattling around when the bus leans over, for example, or something. We go through them like you might, I don't know, like you'd go through a thing of water, right? In terms of their abilities in kind of talking to like, how does like the police department or the ambulance service deal with it? They often have more than one SIM card. They've got like a Verizon and then an AT&T. So if Verizon's not working well, it'll switch. And so we have kind of made that investment. We've looked at like, okay, if you put a specific type of grease on the SIM card and then it goes in, so it sits better, you know what I mean, within the router. We've used Digi. We've made this transition to Cradlepoint. We moved from 4G to 5G. I mean, I think if there was like an easy answer, we would have, figured it out. We find across transit that right trains have a lot better opportunity in terms of the real-time information that they're kicking out. And then buses, not always so much. And we also just like this idea of it's not disturbed if it's there. It's like, okay, someone's installing cameras, someone's taking this data off, and sometimes wiring can also, not be perfect.
Okay, thank you. And Director McKee, my husband has no idea where I am when I'm climbing 8th grade, and I have the same app Strava that you probably have on your phone. So if there's no connectivity, then nobody knows where you are.
If you're, I understand that if you're climbing a grade but going up and down Highway 29 and
No,
we have
right,
people that
exactly.
waiting for the 10 and they can't get it on their phone.
Sometimes though, we do have text messages and those are a little bit more consistent when the bus is not going to be there, but that typically doesn't have anything to do with technology. It has to do with the bus, not having enough buses and not having enough drivers.
Director Alessio?
Yeah, well, I want to thank the gentleman for the public comment because I was not aware. And what I would just like to encourage, because I know that our staff is working very hard, especially you, Rebecca, on this. You're passionate about this. You're trying to problem solve as much as you can with the resources you have to continue to inform us of those really challenging issues that you're facing. So we can get in there and we can try to help. I'll certainly talk with the city regarding the FCC issue and the switching of tower. I ask our county partners to do the same on the county side, if that's something that we can do to improve. And I'm sure you're working with staff, but as an elected, official, we have an opportunity to also encourage that through our city managers or CEO administrators for that to happen. This is, as I look at this through the eyes of an entrepreneur, if I started a business, I would be shut down in a month. And these are people who are depending on this, and again, this is not directed to you. I just know that public transit is and needs to be a priority. It just absolutely has to be. And it feels like we're not making a lot of difference. It has to be consistent. It has to be reliable. There has to be trust. There has to be communication. There just has to be, bottom line. That's just the bottom rung. So whatever we can do as a board to support that, please continue to let us know. Thank you.
Right. Director Sedgley.
Real quick, and thank you, Director Alessio, for that. But I think that pothole, Rebecca, I think that pothole was on State Route 29 and not Jefferson. Okay.
That's very fair. But you paved Jefferson today, one going northbound and one going southbound.
Right, but all kidding aside, I agree. It's, it's not always just funding, it's where we set priorities. And what I hear from the community is reliable, fixed routes. That makes the difference. When it's a fixed route and it's reliable, you can count on it. And I think that's where we should direct our priorities. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments from the board or the public? Okay, then. This was an informational item, and so now we're moving to the last informational item, 12.3, free transit and fare subsidy programs.
Hi, Kate Miller, Executive Director. At the last meeting, the board requested a presentation or information about free fare and fare subsidy programs. And we did an inventory with of our partners in Sonoma and Marin counties on what their programs provide. But just a quick overview. Next slide, please, Laura. We already heavily subsidize transit fares, and I think sometimes this board obviously knows that, but members of the public aren't always aware. They think that their $2 fare is actually covering the entire cost of that ride. But just if we were to require riders to pay 100% of just their operating element of the ride, people on the Vine would pay $25 and people on Vine Go would pay $50 per ride. So that'll give you some feeling for how much that we use our revenues to subsidize those fares. We currently charge $2 for an adult fare, $3.50 for the Route 21, $6 for the Route 29. This is based on, the length of the trip and where it's going. The senior and disabled youth are half of that, or $1.25 respectively. And shuttle services vary depending on the jurisdiction. Yountville's free, most of the others charge $1. Vine Go is double whatever the standard fare is. So in the city of Napa, it's $4 to go anywhere on Vine Go. And remember, those are door-to-door services. We also work with MTC, who funds 50% of the fare for low-income adults. And we are working with Napa Valley College on a student pass program that would charge $7.79 per semester for a full-time student, $3.89 for a semester for the part-time student. And the board, college board, is going to act on that, I believe, this week. We also get revenues from some of our partners around town, Bottle Rock, the Napa Valley Vintners, as an example, to help subsidize big events. Next slide. This is from the MTC countywide or rider survey, sorry. You'll notice that for riders, there are only about less than 20% of them prioritize fares as being an issue or barrier for riding transit. But I just wanted to share that with you. There's other critical issues: more frequent service, more reliable service, and expanded hours are more important to our existing riders. Next slide. So Marin Transit has had a free kindergarten through 12 fare program since the early 2000s. It is funded by Measure money, and they also fund 80 or provide services for free fares for seniors in ADA. This is funded by Measure B. And then fare subsidies for riders living in shelters and transitional housing, which is funded by Marin County Social Service Agencies. Next slide. Petaluma is just launched a 2-year pilot program, which is funded by Petaluma's General Fund and Sonoma County's Climate Resilience Fund, and the Sonoma County Transportation Authority's Measure M, that's a 0.5-cent sales tax. The Sonoma County's Climate Resilience Fund was part of the PG&E settlement, so that's how they're using it, and they're using a lot of it for transit. Next slide. Santa Rosa City Bus has a K through 12 free fare program, which began in 2021 and is funded by the Transportation for Clean Air funds. Those are not funds that are sustainable. You can only use them for a very short period of time. It's not something the Air District supports ongoing funding for. Very hard to meet the cost effectiveness analysis that the Air District imposes on those funds. Their expanded free fare program, again, this is going to be funded by Measure M, the Solano County Transportation Authority's 0.5-cent sales tax, and the Climate Resilience Program. It is due to sunset in 2026, but they are looking for new funding to continue that. Next slide. Sonoma County, same thing, K through 12 is free. Funding is from the Sonoma County Climate Resilience and TFCA, and they're also looking to Sonoma County Transportation Authority for funding out of its measure. Next slide. SMART is sort of independent. SMART is not subject to the TDA fare box recovery, which I will talk about shortly. They don't receive TDA funds. They're a commuter service. They do fund it with their existing sales tax, and it is a K youth and senior program. I think one of the most interesting things that came out of this program, again, it's a pilot program, is the additional adult riders that are paying full fares to escort the seniors and the youth. So that there has been a 0.5% increase in adult riders. Next slide. So TDA is the #1 fund source that we use for operations. It funds about 30 to 40% of our services. It is the requirement for fare box recovery is statutory, and MTC works with us to identify the amount that we are required to meet. The standard for the state is about 20%, but MTC has approved a 15% fare box recovery for fixed route, and then 10% for ADA and shuttle service. This is something that the governor has suspended due to COVID and the low ridership, and that will expire on June 2026. And in order for the funds would be needed to provide fully subsidized program to meet statutory and budgetary requirements. If we were to be able to meet those requirements, we would need to collect fares in the amount of $2.3 million. Next slide. Some ideas on how to do that if the board is interested in moving forward with a free fare program or a more subsidized fare program, is, partnerships with the county and the city. K through 12 school programs. We have tried to work with the school district in the past on trying to figure out how we would do that, and they are been pretty non-responsive to our requests. And then MTC has, in the Air District, have a program under SB 1339, which requires employers with 50 or more employees to have a commuter benefit program, and free transit or subsidies from those businesses would also be a way for us to meet certain free fare programs. Homeowners associations in larger cities, the HOAs, and especially in affordable housing, or low income housing, a portion of the HOA goes towards subsidizing fares. One-time grant opportunities, again, these aren't sustainable, but we can use them for a pilot program. And then Measure U has a portion of it which would come out of NVTA's administration fees if Measure U passes, that would continue the subsidies for low-income adults. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Any questions? Well, Director Sedgley, this was your request, so.
I'll get it here. Thank you. And thank you for bringing this back to us to learn and consider. And in the presentation, it talked about our marketing budget covering some special event days, transient and quality air days. I asked the question earlier, did you have a chance to get that figure for us? What is our marketing budget?
$112,000 a year, but we use it for a lot of things. We use it for outreach on our planning. We use it for, promoting our V commute. We use it for our ribbon cutting and groundbreaking, and there's a whole bunch of things that we use it for.
Thank you. And back on the TDA statutory recovery ratio, it was suspended by Governor Newsom and extended through 2026. There is discussion about that for the board about continuing. So, looking at that, hopefully they can drop that ratio for fair collection. That might help some of our issues moving forward. And I think as a board, we need to look at our TDA funds in the future, how we use those. That's the biggest revenue source for our transportation arm. So how we spend those dollars will be very important moving forward with this. I had a discussion with Smart Train. It was a great discussion, Mr. Cummins, and about, our demographics, the students, the cost is concerning the students, and we address that with student ridership. We're doing a good job. But what challenges seniors are technology, and on Smart, they don't take cash. And so, and if you to get a senior Clipper card, you have to go in with your birth certificate and all those things to get a Clipper card, phone apps for all that expenditures. That's the challenge that they've found on Smart. And you said a 0.5 increase in ridership for adults because of the free programs with students and seniors. I was under the understanding that it was a lot higher than that, it was almost flat, it was almost a break-even component of increased ridership of adults versus the subsidies of the students and seniors. But those are just numbers. We have to figure that out. So, well, it's just out there that maybe it was higher. But I'm not.
Yeah, so just clarification, that number 0.5% is the additional revenues generated by the adult fares, not the number of adult fare, not
Oh, okay,
adult
so
riders.
ridership
Yes.
versus that, yeah.
It's a
so-
revenue number.
Yeah, and one of my goals is ridership, so that's what we're trying to get to. But, yeah, interesting discussion, and I understand too, the field trip is on, the high rail is moved to Halloween, 10/31. So if any of us are, available to do that opportunity, take that opportunity. It sounds like it's exciting future if we can get SMART over east to Napa County.
That's $2 billion, way more than our TDA budget.
Yeah. Well, we'll be in partners. I believe that's all my comments on that. Yeah, and a lot of this funding comes from climate resiliency funds. I don't think we have that in Napa County yet. A lot of measures, we talked about measures that help subsidize this. So in Napa County, moving forward, future measures, maybe we ought to consider alternative transportation.
Well,
Thanks.
if Measure G gets adopted, Napa City will have some extra money.
Yeah.
Uh, instead of that, Director McGee can.
Thank you, Chair. It's McKee,
Oh,
just so you know. I know I get
Okay.
the McGee a lot. So I remember when being brand new here and when we were voting on the fare increases, that there was kind of an incentive for us to vote on that because we were looking for, I think, for the fare box recovery ratio in order to get grants and to qualify.
Well, also to meet our policy, we had not increased fares for a really long time, and our policy is structured in a way where we need to bring to the board that decision. We hadn't done it because of COVID. So, yeah, and part of it is budgetary, right? It'll change the amount of revenues we collect or projected by about $175,000 a year, somewhere around there.
Okay, and I have one question about the actual, the ways people pay. There's the Clipper cards and the fare boxes. I understand that it's quite frequent that the fare boxes are not working and that, Clipper cards are not necessarily punched. So
Yeah.
are there ways that we can improve upon that?
Yeah, part of that has to do with, again, login, because it requires 2 logins. And then part of it is that sometimes our fare boxes just fail. But in addition to cash, we also have our own fare media. So that's another thing that we have. So we have 3, we're not, MTC encourages small operators, bus operators to use a Clipper card, but we're not required to. The commuter services are. Yeah.
So are we losing revenue based on?
Yeah, probably, but the Clipper issue is, we do a training and the drivers, do what they do. And also we sometimes have equipment failure that's Clipper related, which is again, something that we let MTC know about. And I don't know if we've ever calculated off the top of our heads what that loss is, but something to take a look at. We don't really have an idea of being able to, do that. We can do it using APCs probably.
And how do the fare boxes work? Excuse me for not writing the 10, I should know, but I don't.
Sure. So there's fare media and then there's also coins and dollars. And then it measures what that is based on where it's being put in what slot.
Okay.
And then when the buses get to the yard, they dump, nobody ever touches the money. They just get dumped into a vault. And then we have a truck that picks them up and deposits them in our bank account.
So it's kind of your secure system, but
Yeah.
they're not
Clipper-
always
the-
working.
Yeah, the Clipper transponder is a separate unit that's just attached somewhere on the bus.
Okay, thank you. Very informational.
Okay. Director Pedrosa.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I do agree that, Member Sedgley is raising some great points about increased ridership. But I also understand, okay, we do have a fiscal responsibility. And I think it would be great to run some analysis on what it would cost, right? If we were to do some of these, I would say a pilot program where I'm geared towards is I don't want it to be free for everyone, because when it's free, people don't appreciate it. But I do think what I would say, I am interested in helping people that need help the most that aren't riding public transit. And I think we know who that universe of people are. They typically are on some type of government assistance. Those folks traditionally, whether they're young or old, right, they're getting assistance from the County Health and Human Services. I think it would be a pretty cool model or pilot to run and say, okay, are we doing that already? Are we offering free transit to those that get WIC, stamp, those social services? I think starting there and see if that increases ridership, then you can build off it without creating too much financial exposure to this organization, because the $200 million that we have to raise for that, if we start cutting at the end, it's going to all add up at some point. So I'm mindful to your fiscal responsibility for this organization, but I do think starting somewhere and piloting a program could be valuable. So I don't know if you want to respond to that.
I mean, I think the biggest challenge is the budget hole. But I mean, it doesn't take analysis. I could ask Tony. I mean, he's got to be in front of his desk, but he knows the number of people who are, K through 12 riding our system and how much, that would cost, for instance, right?
I think that would be great to show us that
Yeah,
number.
I'd be more inclined to actually recommend something like that. And the reason being is
Which
that
part, the kids or the?
K through 12. Because I think, particularly challenged people that are, for instance, don't want to be in subsidized housing or housing provided for the unhoused, might use our buses as a shelter.
Yeah,
And that I think is an ongoing problem for every system.
and I'll push back on that because I'm not talking about the problems that Bart is facing. So I hear you. I'm talking about families that might live in apartments that are qualifying for food stamps or discounted meals with their kids. And we're not going to have 100% penetration. We're not going to do that. But if you have 20%, if you move the needle 20%, that's 20%.
Yeah. And the Marin system is kind of an interesting one because that's what they do. They actually have to be in transitional housing in order to be eligible, as opposed to just having it free for people who are low income.
I'm not interested in
Yeah.
going to the camps and offering passes, to
Okay.
be clear. But I do think you coming back and reporting out on what partnership you could have
Okay.
with the county and then looking at the cost of kids, I think it's something we have to explore too. So I'd like to see that as the next step. Thank you.
Okay, Director Williams.
Yeah, thanks to Director Sedgley for bringing this topic up. I think it's very interesting. Thank you, staff, for assembling this report. I think it's an interesting discussion. I just have one question. The staff report on the first page refers to the fares making up 6% or a little over $800,000 of the total operating budget. And is that 816,000, is that net of the collection expenses, or is that net of the collection expenses?
No, we factor our collection costs as part of our overall cost. So no, it would be part of that percentage.
So
Yeah.
so that's a net
So
number.
yeah, we have just to be clear, we have transactional costs on every media that we use for fares. Cash is the most expensive to handle, then Clipper, and then our own fare media. So all those costs are found in various parts of our budget, including TransDev staff, including armored truck service, and all of that is a factor of our costs. Yeah. Overall costs.
So the 816,000 is the net revenue from the
It's
fare.
what we collect from fares, yeah.
Yeah.
And that's a budget number based on our fare increase.
Right, Director Alessio.
Yes, I'm very interested in this topic and thank you, Director, especially for bringing this forward. I think it's, for me, it's kind of where are the needs and where are the opportunities. My understanding is that we have a pretty strong student ridership. The need is really our older adults. We know this through every plan, every health assessment, that's been done out there. The greatest need is for our older adults. Not saying not to help families and children. I just know that the greatest need, based on all the reports I've read over the last several years, it's our older adults that need more transportation assistance and access to it. So I think I agree with Director Pedrosa in terms of doing an analysis. I do know that, but I don't know the actual, the data on this. I do know that folks who are on assistance, some folks who are on assistance, do receive bus passes, bus cards through social services, through community-based organizations, through the County of Napa. Through those organizations, they are given assistance through bus passes. I don't know to what amount or how accessible that is, if there is an inequity in that area. But again, when we look at this, let's look at who really needs it most. If we have a really strong student ridership and that's being supported, then maybe that's not where we focus, the K through 12. Maybe maybe it's for older adults. Let's just really look at the need and what's available out there for folks who do need assistance to create that equity. And speaking of BART, I saw in the news recently that BART their ridership has really increased. It's all of a sudden it's really picked up. And I know it's a different form of transportation, but I wonder if that's a sign that in the rural areas that we're, pending addressing some of these issues that we discussed earlier, if we're going to naturally see ridership return too. It's just a later return because we're a more rural area. Okay, you want to go?
We've been reporting that it is slowly going up and every quarter, I mean, there's some deviation depending on season, but it's overall the trajectory is going
So
up.
we're
It's
probably
just
going to see
slow.
that. It's just slower because we're smaller and more rural. But yeah, if we can do that analysis and really look at where the needs are. I know the older adults are in need, an area of need, and then where the subsidies are already existing before we offer that. Thank you.
Okay, from my perspective, I look at this as a former finance guy. So in my head, the idea of providing free or reduced fares means you've got to come up with some revenue to backfill it. What I'm impressed on the Napa Valley College front, if they add a $7 or $8 charge to their student fees, that money theoretically would come to us to basically cover all the fares for the students. So that's a good example in which we are able to then provide free bus service for college students, but it's funded through those fees. Likewise, if we could provide free bus fare for government assistant people by working with the county or other funding sources to say, okay, here's what it will cost to provide a free fare and we'll bill you and go from there. So I think there's opportunities kind of along Director Pedrosa's point. There are certain demographics that we can identify because there's a funding source connected to it. And certainly those are areas that we could explore. But, otherwise, at the end of the day, you got to be able to pay the bills. And even if the fare box recovery ratio is never restored, you still have to have more money than you spend. So I think it's an exciting opportunity. It's certainly something we should look at more, but we also got to figure out how it is financially viable and sustainable. But, go ahead.
Hi, I do want to just make a comment about seniors and transportation. It is always in the top two of needs, but I want us to be aware of the nuances in that sentence. A 65-year-old senior getting free transportation is great. A 95-year-old senior is never going to take the bus. I could be proven wrong, but I don't think so. So when we go down that road and look at what it means, I just want us to be clear about it's not a one-stop shop. That's it.
Very good point. All right. That was an information. Oh,
That's right. We need to move on.
Oh, okay. That was information only. That puts us to closed session. So we have 3 closed session items. Oz, if you'd like.
So I think the first one is going to be, right, sorry.
Yeah.
The board's now entering into closed session regarding the 3 items listed: conference with legal counsel, anticipated litigation. Item 13.2, public employment pursuant to government code section 54957B1. And item 3.3, conference with real property negotiators pursuant to government